We're going to begin by talking about the importance of youth in the church, youth ministry, youth pastor. In Ephesians, the Bible gives us instruction in Ephesians chapter 4. It tells us in verse 11, and he gave some apostles and some prophets and some evangelists and some pastors and teachers. And then it continues on and it says, for the perfecting of the saints, for the work of the ministry, for the edifying of the body of Christ, till we all come in the unity of the faith and of the knowledge of the Son of God, unto a perfect man, unto the measure of the stature of the fullness of Christ. The Bible here is giving us the reasons why we have pastors in a church. We're going to look at that idea as it relates to youth ministry. The first thing I want to look at is why have a youth pastor. Is it important to have a youth pastor? The Bible doesn't necessarily give direction and say that there specifically has to be a youth pastor, but it talks about pastors in a church. And so we want to address that a little bit. And as we address it, the first thing we're going to kind of look at is some qualifications that you should be looking for, qualifications that should be in you as a young person that is looking to go in youth ministry, or in a ministry as a church when you're looking for qualifications for someone to work with your young people. First, we have spiritual qualifications. And I list three, and there could be a lot more, but I think that there's three specifically, and we'll list those out and then go back and kind of review them. So spiritual qualifications. 1, they should know and love Christ. 2, they should have a consistent, exemplary Christian life. 3, they should be called of God. So let's look at those three. First, knowing and loving Christ. This is obvious if he's going to lead young people to more maturity spiritually. If he's going to lead others to know Christ, you need to know Christ yourself. And this is important when working with youth. The most important thing is not that they are cool or if they have some outgoing personality. One of the main things that you need to be looking for is, do they know and love Christ? Do they have a knowledge of the Word of God? Can they inspire your young people to love the Word of God? The new birth within a man obviously changes him so that he loves the Lord. So obviously we're talking about somebody that's saved. If you are in a church and they're having an unsaved person work with the youth, that is not a good sign. You want somebody obviously that's saved, but more than that, you want them to have a deep desire for Christ and for knowing Him, for loving Him. The second thing we mentioned is a consistent, exemplary Christian life. This goes hand in hand with our first one, but youth, more than anybody, are quick to detect and they despise hypocrisy. The inconsistency of adults in a survey over 30 years ago done by the National Sunday School Association, the inconsistency of adults was one of the main reasons people dropped out of Sunday school. And they stopped going to church because of inconsistency. Now we know in Soulwinning there's that big gripe, well, I don't go to church because there's a bunch of hypocrites. We understand that, but and I know the false complaints that are there and the stone throwing that is done. But when you are looking for someone to work with youth, they need to have a consistent, exemplary Christian life. And then if you are wanting to work with youth, you need to put in place a consistent, exemplary life. That's where there's a mistake in some places where a pastor is having a hard time, his youth group is growing, and so here's a man that's been coming for a little bit, and what should we do? Oh, you know what, let's I know he's a little weak on standards. I know he's not really that great of a soul winner, but he's semi-faithful to church. Let's have him work with the young people. That's a mistake, because those young people are going to pick up on those character traits. If you want young people then that are half-hearted, that attend haphazardly to the church functions, that don't really understand standards, well then that's what you're going to have, because the guy leading them is that way. So, spiritual qualifications: they know and love Christ. They have a consistent, exemplary Christian life. Then they're called of God. There can be a lot of debate theologically in this area. We're not here to discuss that. That's for a discussion in the theology of the calling of God. I believe in a calling of God. I remember when I was a young person in high school and God called me into his service, I could not get away from that. And in the same regard, a church, I believe, should come to the place where they have enough, maybe resources, where they can hire a man. Maybe he's going to be assistant, and part of that assistant's job would be the youth. And if he's going to be working in those capacities, as the pastor, as the ones in authority that are looking at people when they're coming in, you need to talk to them and say, do you feel that you are called to God's work? I think it's very important. So we looked at some spiritual qualifications. There probably are others that you could list, but those are three big qualifications that someone should have in their life if they are looking to work with youth. Then we have personal qualifications, things that are there personally in your life that should be there, or you're looking at someone, you're interviewing somebody. These are personal qualifications. One, underneath this, under the personal qualifications, they should have humility. A proud person will never get along with the pastor or the congregation. Remember, you're coming in and working with parents. All right, it is not the youth pastor's job to rear these teenagers. He's coming alongside. You're a team with these parents. You're working with them. You're a tool. You're a help to them. So if you're arrogant and cocky, well then you're not going to have a great relationship with the parents. Also, if you're arrogant and cocky, then you're always going to be fighting the pastor. You're going to be undermining his authority. He doesn't give you enough praise. You're not getting enough attention. And so there needs to be a humble spirit. Pride and self-importance need to be separate. They need to be out of the person of that person that is working with the youth. Humility, actually working with young people, humility helps unite the youth group. The youth pastor needs to have humility. Then the second thing under personal qualifications, he should have emotional maturity. Emotional maturity. And what do we mean by emotional maturity? If he is up and down, if he is unstable himself. Remember, young people are very inconsistent. They're unstable because of a lot of things physically, spiritually, they're growing. There can be a lot of unstableness with the young people. They don't need a guy leading them that is that way. So emotional stability means that he should have that. He should be stable, consistent in his walk, in his life. The third thing, forethought and initiative. He should anticipate problems, aggressively intercept these problems. He's thinking ahead of time. It's very important. So he's spending time thinking about problems that may be coming ahead, spiritually analyzing the things, meeting with parents, developing this. This is going to take forethought and initiative. The fourth personal qualification is self-control. If the youth pastor cannot control himself, he's not going to be able to control others. He should be tolerant. It doesn't mean that he's lax in discipline. He should be firm, but he needs patience and forgiveness. Then the last thing, as far as the personal qualifications, he should have a burden for youth. I don't think that you should pick somebody, even if it's a layman, if that's the stage you're at in your church and you're trying to get a layman to come and work with the young people in your church. If he does not like youth, then I would not have him work with youth. Everybody has different gifts and different qualities. And some people, they just do not relate with youth. And so do not pick that person to work with the youth when they say, you know what, I despise them. I don't like being around them. And so those are some spiritual qualifications. And then we have some personal qualifications. Then I think thirdly, it is helpful, and this is not always true that you're going to have it, but I think thirdly, it's good to have some educational qualifications. We're living in an age when academic degrees and professional training have become the measuring stick of a vocation. And so it's not something that has to be. It's not something that, well, you've got to have a bachelor's in pastoral theology, or you've got to have a master's, or you've got to have such and such a degree. But I do think that giving a youth worker, giving a man that is called into the ministry, helping him further his education is very important. That's one of the reasons why we're developing this course and we have an online youth class. Why are we doing that? Because it is important to have some education in working with young people. There is a lot of misunderstanding. There's not a lot of Bible that is being taught in most places, and there's not a lot of understanding even in youth as far as a guy leading youth and developing of their hermeneutic skills and learning how to study the Bible. And so young people then are not going to know how to study the Bible when the guy in charge does not know how to study the Bible. So some education and some working in the area of studying the Bible, knowing how to go through the Bible, knowing different things about youth, and having some experience with that. Maybe working with the pastor alongside him for a number of months or a number of years so that he gets some education in this regards is very important. So the first thing we talked about is some qualifications. The second thing I want to look at is relationships. What are the relationships that a youth pastor is going to have? The job of a youth pastor is not a new thing in churches. I was a youth pastor for over 20 years. My youth pastor, who is now pastor in Columbus, Ohio, he was a youth pastor for about 20 years. My current youth pastor here at Fairhaven Baptist Church has worked with youth for 10 to 15 years. So there is about 50 or 60 years of experience, and it goes back to the 70s as far as my memory and my youth pastor. It's not something new, a youth pastor. And so there is relationships, and we can study some of these things and look at it and see some of maybe the minuses and plus and some of the mishaps that have been done, and we can learn from other people's experience. And so what is the relationships that you need to work on and build as a youth pastor? One is a relationship to the pastor. Remember this, that the pastor is responsible for everything that goes on. He's the senior pastor. In today's day and age, they call it the senior pastor. The youth pastor holds a trust to the senior pastor. His ministry is an extension of the pulpit ministry of the pastor, the senior pastor of the local church. And so you need to work on developing a relationship with the pastor. We're going to talk about this a little more thoroughly in a lecture by itself. So in this one, we're not going to deal with all of it, but the pastor and youth pastor should share similar viewpoints on doctrines of the Bible and doctrines of the church. If the youth pastor finds his beliefs at odds with those of the senior pastor, he should not go behind his back. You need to sit down, talk with the pastor. If you disagree, then you need to go find another job at another church. And so there is a relationship to the pastor. Then there's a relationship to the parents. And this is very important. When you start out, remember this as someone starting to work with the youth. You have to work on developing a relationship with those parents. And that will take time. It's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take probably years to develop a strong relationship with the parents. And you say, well, I don't have years. Well, then probably you're not going to have as strong a youth group as you would like. If you're looking at the youth group as a stepping stone to something else in the ministry, then probably you're not going to have the rewards that should be there, because I believe this, you should be stepping into that job looking for longevity, not as a stepping stone. I think it's wrong for folks to be looking as the youth in their church as a place of ministry to step into something else. What happens is then the kids are guinea pigs. The kids, they read through that. They know that you're just a short timer. You're not there for long, and they can remember teenagers. They have a keen sense of reading those type of things. So there needs to be a relationship with the parents. This is going to take time, and there are different things you can do to develop a relationship. One thing is that you should be in the homes with the parents, and this is going to take months and maybe a couple of years. Of course, you're going to be dealing with problems with the parents, but you need to have a relationship with them even in spite of problems. Don't let it always be that the only time you're getting a hold of the parents is when there's a problem. And they're going to dread you coming. So there needs to be a relationship to the parents. The third relationship, obvious, all right, so you have the parents and you have the pastor, but then you have the young people themselves. And with the young people, you need to, there's two things that you need to remember when working with young people. Number one, you need to earn their respect. You're going to be coming in, they don't know you and you don't know them, and it's going to take time. I've had a lot of guys help me in youth ministry over the 20-something years that I've worked with our youth. And over that time, there'd be a lot of younger guys, and they come in and they sit down and they say, you know what, the young people, they just don't respect me. Well, they've been working with them for 3 months, maybe 6 months, maybe even a year. Well, I've been here 20 years, 20 plus years. They've seen me, and they've seen me in good times and bad times. They've seen me on spiritual, plateaus, spiritual mountains, and spiritual valleys. So they see that. Yeah, and there's consistency because I'm here. I'm here after 20-something years. Well, this young person that is now helping with the young people, the youth group, teens have seen them for 6 months. Maybe a month, maybe 2 months. And respect has to be earned with young people. It takes time. And they may not trust you all the way. And a lasting, friendly relationship is going to take some time. And so if you're coming in as a youth pastor, you need to listen to the young people. You need to learn to spend time with them. Yes, there's counseling. But, it's not all counseling. Some of it is just in casual conversation. So you want to make yourself available. You need to work on having things where you are interacting with those young people so that they can respect you. You earn that respect. Then also, the second thing with the young people is learn how to talk with them and have that tactful discipline. There should be discipline in the youth group. It should be firm, but it should be that graciousness that you have. It should be that within your youth group, all young people know that they can come to you, They can talk with you. There's not a pecking order that anybody can come. Now, obviously, I can remember this working with many families, and some families would come and say, well, you have favorites. And I'm like, well, I don't really have favorites. But what happens is that the kids that really want more and more, you obviously are going to spend more time with. And why is that? Well, because they're always there. Well, that's not necessarily favorites. It's they're hungry. And so they're there all the time. Well, obviously, you're going to spend more time to them. And so you need to have times where maybe you explain that to the parents and say, I'm not trying to have favorites, but obviously if a kid is saying, hey, what do you got here? Or can I come and spend time with you here? And can I do this? And they are here all the time, then obviously you're spending more time with them. It's not necessarily favorites. It's just that those kids, those teenagers are available more, and you're gonna spend your time and invest in the folks that are wanting it. And so that will happen. So building relationships is very important. And so there's 3 relationships that we touched on. There's the relationship of the pastor, the relationship with the parents, and the relationship to the young people. So we said some qualifications, then we talked about some relationships. The last thing that we're going to look at is some duties. What are some duties that you can put together for a man that's going to work with the youth? Or if you are going to come in and work with the youth, what are some things that can help you in organizing? Well, one is just plain supervision. You may be then called upon, and you're going to supervise the different activities of the youth. There's a supervision of the work, there's supervision of maybe ministries that they're involved in, and so there's supervision. There's other things that are kind of involved there, and let me give you a couple of them. As the church grows and the youth grow, then there's going to be other things that you're going to need to coordinate. You're going to need to coordinate soul winning and ministry opportunities. And as a man that's in charge of the youth, you want to be working to create some of these soul winning opportunities. There should be teaching of soul winning. We do that here. Our youth pastor is in charge of it. We have a curriculum, and we even have a curriculum for 7th and 8th grade during the school year. We do Thursday night church service, and we call it Basics. And Basics brings them in, and they start learning doctrine. They start learning different things about soul winning. Then they start learning how to work in ministries. And there's a 2-year curriculum on working with them, on training them so that they are ready when they're in 9th and 10th grade. They have some foundational things already in place so that they are ready to work. And some of that's going to take time. Again, we've been at it for 20-something years, and so it all didn't come right away. You know, after 5 years, after 10 years, you notice this and you notice this, and so you develop some programs that way. And that's why longevity is very important. And so soul winning, being a counselor, I would recommend sitting down with your pastor, trying to get some materials, and not worldly materials. I'm not talking about worldly materials, but you need to develop a philosophy with counseling. It's very important. You need to have boundaries set up with the teenage girls, especially when a youth pastor is younger. There's a tendency of the teenage girls to be attracted, and not always in a wrong way, but they are attracted to this young, sharp man that is sold out for God. And so there needs to be boundaries even in counseling, especially with girls, with females. And counseling doesn't always have to be in an office. There are casual conversations that maybe you're going out soul winning and it's just you and a couple of the teens, and you stop and you grab a Coke, or you stop at McDonald's and you grab a fry, or different things like that. And so there's talking, there's communication, and you need to have some principles, some helps, and leading and guiding the young people. So there are different things, different duties: supervising in general, making up schedules. You're going to be developing a curriculum and teaching. More than likely, you're going to be teaching Sunday school. And so the Sunday school curriculum needs to be thought through. There's resources. We'll probably list some of those and have them in the resource area in our class here. But there are some resources out there, but you need to be looking at this and thinking it through. As far as that teaching, organizing different activities. You need to sit down with the pastor then and develop a philosophy of what type of activities you're going to have. How many fun activities do you want? We typically do about one a month, or one about every 6 or 7 weeks. We don't think that there should be a fun activity all the time. It's not just fun all the time. So these are things that you want to be thinking about. You're organizing these things. You're counseling. You're working on soul winning, developing all of these programs. That's some of the things that you should have as duties as a youth pastor.